Hello, I'm Jessie, the Sleepy Koala, and today I will be going through my January wrap-up, and I still cannot believe that it's already January. So this is actually my second time trying to film this video. The first one had no sound because something had run out of battery and I didn't realize until I had filmed 2 videos. And only after that did I come to find that the sound was not there. So this is my second attempt, third. I don't know. I've tried this video several times. This is hopefully my last attempt at doing my January wrap-up. But before we get into any of that, I would like to say a gigantic thank you to Patrick Leo, who shouted me out recently on his channel, which is so exciting. I was not expecting it, and I was watching his shout out video and I hadn't looked at the thumbnail properly, so I didn't even see that my icon was there. And then suddenly my name's being said and I'm being talked about, and it was wild. It was really, really wild. And I feel very privileged to have been chosen to be shouted out by Patrick. So thank you so much. Patrick does amazing videos. He is so well versed in science fiction and fantasy, and I love just how intricate and nuanced his takes can be. He puts out dedicated reviews quite often for books, which is something I would like to start doing a bit more. I haven't really done many dedicated reviews. Patrick does a lot of them, and I highly, highly, highly recommend that you go check out his channel because he is a blast to watch and his videos are a lot of fun. So thank you once again, Patrick. I feel very honored. Now into the video. Remember my TBR video where I thought I would spread series out with 1 book a month so I could read different things? Yeah, well, that didn't happen at all. Instead, I just read everything back to back because why would I not do that? This month, I got into the Mirrorverse series. I got really, really into the Mirrorverse series. And I read the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th book all in the 1 month back to back. I screwed up the timing when I was ordering things and should have just ordered 3 and 4 together. So I didn't have to wait, but I did. And I had those little bits of waiting in between where all I wanted was the next book because I just wanted to keep reading because I'm so invested in this series now. Now that I've actually finished the series, I'm going back and I'm rereading them, or at least I'm rereading 2, 3, and 4. I can't get my hands on 1 at the moment. A Winter's Promise is just sold out and on back order. So I'm waiting for that one to come in. And then when it comes in, I'll read that as well. But I would really, really, really like to do dedicated deep dives into each of these books because they were fascinating and I love them so, so much. So I really want to stay in this world, in this universe for a bit longer so I can really dig down deep and look at the intricacies of these stories because they were fantastic and I love them and I just want to share them with everyone and I just want to shout from the rooftops that people should read these books because they were so good, guys. They were so good. Here are the 3 books. We've got The Missing of Clairedelune, which is book 2, Memory of Babel, which is book 3, and The Echo of Storm, which is book 4. They were fantastic. And I also just appreciate this color scheme. Book 1, A Winter's Promise, is blue. So I'm just waiting to have them all on my bookshelf next to each other like this. They're gonna look so pretty. They're so pretty. I'm gonna put these down because they're very heavy. I will talk about each of these books individually in this wrap up, but I do want to talk very briefly about the series overall because I did have some comments. Mainly, this series has a really weird structure to it. Getting to the end of book 4 and looking back, book 1 just felt so different. And it felt so disconnected from where we ended up. I think this is largely because books 1 and 2 take place in one location, and books 3 and 4 take place in another location. And when we change those locations, we also change the surrounding cast. The characters from books 1 and 2 are really pushed off to the sidelines, and we get new supporting characters in book 3 that carry through to book 4. So it just makes it feel like it's really separate from the first 2 books, even though it is one continuous story. I am really looking forward to going back and doing a reread of the first book, A Winter's Promise, to see what foreshadowing is actually there for the rest of the books, because I don't remember there being any from when I read it, but in saying that, I've just started The Missing of Clairedelune again, and there is just some incredible foreshadowing that is just right there at the beginning of the second book, and I didn't notice it, so I'm not going to trust my memory of whether there's anything in the first book. But it does kind of feel like the first book is a bit separate, even with this kind of split down the middle, because there's an overarching plot that starts in book 2 that goes to book 4. It is the glue of the story. And then in book 1, it just doesn't seem to have any of that plot. It seems much more like a prequel or a setup book. And there is a lot that needs to be set up. There is so much world building to do. There is a lot of different relationships and moving of chess pieces that needs to happen before book 2. And book 1 does so much to introduce us to the characters and to really dive deep into who they are and how they relate to other people. So book 1 does have its place. It's just, it feels a little bit separate from books 2, 3, and 4. But then books 1 and 2 feel separate from books 3 and 4. So there's some weird structure stuff going on here. But I will say, this is a translated book from French. And I don't know if this is just weirdly structured or if it's just a structure that is not often used in English publishing. But maybe this is something that is a little bit more common in French books. Let me know, if you're a French reader, what you think of differences between French books and English books. Do you find that there's much of a difference in terms of structure, in terms of tropes, and the way that stories are put together? Or do you find them pretty much the same and the language is just different? I would really like to know. That sounds really interesting to me. Also, if you speak another language that isn't French, please feel free to comment as well. But to talk about these books individually for a little bit. The first one I read was The Missing of Clairedelune. This book has a great plot to it, though the beginning is really, really stuffed full of things. There's a lot of different plot threads that are being thrown at you within the first 100 pages of this book. And until you get to the end of the first part, which thankfully is not actually very long, it's just overwhelming. There's so much going on and you just don't know what you're meant to keep track of. It's so easy to forget something. But then we get to the end of part 1, go into part 2, and it's much smoother sailing from there. And we're following mainly this one plot thread of this mystery of these people who are going missing from Clairedelune. One of the things that I love so much about this plotline was actually that it forced Thorn and Ophelia to work together, which is very different from how they have interacted up to this point, where they are very separated and generally don't want to talk to each other. Now they're being forced into a situation where they have to work together even if they don't want to. This does so much for their relationship development and is exactly the type of stuff that I love to read. I really love these slow burn romances, and this one also has the enemies to lovers trope in it as well. It's just done so very, very, very well. Forcing them into a situation together just really gives so much room for the relationship to grow and to change. As well as the relationships, this book does very well at expanding the world and the scope of everything. And it very much sets up that you're going to learn more about the rest of the world, about its history and about its lore, and that is going to be relevant to the story going forward. Also, the ending of this book was just phenomenal. It was so good. It set up so many brilliant things for the next book that I was just dying to read the next one immediately, and I didn't have it. But there is some stuff that happens at the end of this book that is just so exciting. It was unexpected, it was intriguing, and I was so excited for the third book going off the end of this. Speaking of the third book is The Memory of Babel. I really enjoyed this book. I would say it was probably a 4-star read. I don't think it needs to exist in this current form. I don't quite know why this was done, but we go from the end of the second book where all of these mysteries and these villains have been set up, and then the third book puts it all on the back burner so that our heroes can learn more about their enemies. And it's just like a giant research break for a whole book. I probably wouldn't have had as much of an issue with that if we hadn't had the end of book 2 set things up to feel dire, like there's not enough time and they're on the clock to try and defeat the big bad. But it did. And then this book's just like, nah, we'll put that over there so that we can do some learning, and then we'll come back to it later, because that's how it works, right? You can just put the bad guys in a corner until you need them. So that's what this book felt like. But in and of itself, it was really good. It just felt really weirdly placed. There was definitely things in this book that had to happen. And a lot of it, again, is the relationship between Thorn and Ophelia, and seeing that progress and seeing how that changes. This book has some of the most painful angst in it. It was heart-wrenching to read, and I loved it. I loved every moment of it. Give me the pain for characters. That's exactly what I want. And there were some very relevant plot things that come up in this book, particularly at the end. They make some discoveries, and those discoveries are very relevant to things going forward. I think it just would have worked much better if the second book hadn't made me feel like there was this timer that was being held over the good guy's head of how much time they had until things went badly, and then they just waste a bunch of time learning things. There are some very good side characters in this book. They are not super fleshed out, but I feel like at this point in the narrative, they don't really need to be. They're just kind of there for when you need them to be there, and they're enough of a character that they don't feel completely two-dimensional. They're just not super fleshed out. But that was okay, because they were there as the support, and their places in the story fit perfectly fine. The one other criticism I have about this book is that it feels like Ophelia's character arc was going backwards at some points. Ophelia has been controlled and oppressed and held under people's thumbs for this entire series. And the second book, it really felt like she was finally getting some of her own confidence and her own freedom to do what she wanted. And then this book, she's just back being controlled by other people. And it was just frustrating to read, because I liked seeing her with more independence and being able to do what she wanted to do. So to see that slide backwards a bit so that the same thing was happening again was frustrating. But it wasn't the biggest frustration. It was just something that I was aware of. On to book 4, The Storm of Echoes, the one that I don't have a written review for yet, so I'll just have to try and remember everything off the top of my head. This book was everything I thought the book 3 was going to be. This book, of course, is the last book, but it deals with all of the big mysteries and plots that were introduced at the end of book 2, and it does so in a really compelling way. A lot of this book, though, is very confusing, but I think it's meant to be. It wasn't until I got to the end and I had the full picture of everything that things made sense. But when we were being drip-fed bits of information during Ophelia's investigation, it was so confusing. And something that I appreciate, though I know other people probably hate this, is in the book, we would be given information and Ophelia would come to some conclusion, or she would realize something that I, as the reader, have no idea what she's going on about or thinking. And then she would explain it to someone else so that I, as the reader, knew what she was thinking. And I really appreciated this, because I found that I was confused by some bits, but then they were explained, so I was less confused afterwards. And some people will probably hate this and just want to be able to figure it out on their own, or don't want to feel like they're being treated like something needs to be explained to them. But honestly, the mysteries in this book are really confusing. So having someone to help with an explanation of what the hell is going on really, really helped and was good. This book had a fantastic ending. It was quite a long ending and was quite exhausting to read. But I imagine it was also quite exhausting for the characters as well. But things wrapped up really nicely. This book had quite a lot of antagonists in it. And I didn't quite realize how many there were until we were getting close to the end. And I had the thought of, how are we going to deal with all of these minor antagonists on top of the major antagonists? And then we did. We just dealt with them, and they were no longer a problem. And I was thoroughly impressed by it. There was one thing, though, in the ending that I don't know if I liked or not. Well, I know that I didn't like it, but I don't know if it was I just wanted something different to happen, but accepted what did happen, or if I just don't like what happened and wish something else had happened instead. I just don't know whether I want to accept the way it happened or dislike the way it happened. And I think this is going to be the case for a lot of readers. I think this is going to be the really contentious part where people either are fine with it or they hate it. And there's not going to be much of a middle ground. So there is something like that in this book. And of course, we have to mention Thorn and Ophelia. Again, their relationship in this book was fantastic. When you have slow burn relationships like theirs, when you finally get the payoff, it's so worth it. And the way that their relationship is done in this was just perfect. It was wonderful. And I really, really enjoyed seeing the final part of their relationship arc together. But overall, this book was brilliant and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a great finale to the series, though I would love to have more, and I do wish that there were more. There is apparently a novella for this series, but it has not been translated, so I cannot read it, and this makes me sad. But at least I got to read the base series, because man, did it really capture my heart and soul. This book series has really, really won me over. But overall, this book was really good. I think all of the books I would say are 4-star books. None of them were quite 5-star. For all that these books have really taken me in, I don't think I would say any of them are 5-star books, but that doesn't matter. We can still fall in love with 4-star books. And I would say these were all 4-star books. Now that I have talked for a very long time about a single series, let's talk about the other things that I read in January. Next up, we have Hero of Ages by Brandon Sanderson. I'm not actually finished this yet as of recording, but I will be as of posting, so I'm going to include this anyway. This is the third book in the Mistborn trilogy, and it is pretty damn fantastic. It really expands on the world of Mistborn so much, and it was almost jarring a little bit because I forgot just how big of a jump it is going from book 2 into book 3. We've got the entire world involved and included, whereas the other books are focused on a single city. It's just a very big jump into the epic part of epic fantasy, but it is also a very good jump into it. I have actually been struggling to get through this, mostly because my brain is so obsessed with the Mirror Visitor series at the moment that I can't get it to focus on other things. So it's making it a bit difficult for me to get through Hero of Ages, but I know that I love this book. I know that I adore it. It was my favorite Cosmere book for a while, but then Words of Radiance is just so good, guys. It's really hard to beat Words of Radiance, but this book really is up there as getting close to second. I know last time I read this book, I got to the halfway point and then I just binged the rest of the book in like a day because it's just that good and the ending is that good. Sanderson sticks his endings and he stuck that ending so well in this book. Though there is something in this book as well that is kind of controversial and people will either be okay with it or they will hate it, like with the last book. And I have seen people with both of these opinions. But I love this book, and I highly recommend Mistborn if you're looking to get into Sanderson's works. I actually have a video going through the Cosmere reading order that I'll link up there and in the description below if you want to take a look and get some more information about the other Cosmere books. But Mistborn is a great starting point. It's where I started, and that clearly went very well for me after starting this book series. So I do highly recommend this as a place to start. And again, if you're looking for more information on where to start in the Cosmere, I highly recommend my Cosmere reading video. Next up, we have a non-fiction book, Teach Yourself How to Learn. This is the student's version of a book my husband is reading because he is a community college professor. And his is How to Teach Students to Learn, I think. This book was really, really good. It's very short, very, very, very short, which did help me because I struggled to get through nonfiction. I'm going back to study this year. I'm actually starting class this week and doing a chemistry course at the moment before going into doing more full-time study. And I've been a little bit stressed about the idea of going back to school after being out of school for 2 years, I think, at this point. So I was watching a lot of YouTube videos trying to find out better ways to study, better ways to prepare for exams, things like that. And my husband had to start reading his version of this book for work. So he gifted me the student's version for Christmas. And it has been really good. There is so much packed in here. There are so many different strategies that I can now try. I'm definitely going to be going back to this book frequently, just so I can see what else there is I can do to try and improve how I'm learning, how I'm studying. And this book was fantastic. I highly recommend it if you are doing study anywhere. It has great tips and tricks in it on how to improve your study. And finally, we have the grandest bookshop in the world. This is a delightful story that I have been reading for 18 months now. It has been not quite 2 years, but a long time that I have been reading this book. It was just nice to have something light that I could pick up, read a few pages, put down, and just have it there for the times where I want something that is lighter in nature. This is a children's book about a family that owns a magical bookshop in Melbourne, Australia, back in the early 1900s, I think. The father who runs the bookshop makes a deal with a dark magician who they have had a rivalry for a long time, because the dark magician offers to bring back his daughter who died of scarlet fever. In exchange, he wants the bookshop. Two of the children, Pearl and Valley, take it on themselves to try and rescue the bookshop from the dark magician and make a deal with him that if they can beat his challenges, then he will leave the bookshop and their family alone. Most of the story is following Pearl and Valley as they go through many challenges within the bookshop that has become more and more animated and magical as these games progress. I thought that the challenges in this were really, really fun. And there were different riddles and puzzles that the children had to solve that you as the reader could also stop and try and solve. And I was no good at any of them. I am not good at riddles and puzzles. But it was so much fun watching these children work through each of the puzzles. I was so impressed by the first puzzle in particular that I'm going to read it and challenge all of you watching to try and figure out the answer. Put it in the comments, and then at the end of this video, I'll reveal what the answer to the riddle is. The riddle goes: beginning in anguish, surrounded by care, you'll find I reside in the midst of despair. I dwell in the mountains, the plains and the waves, seen never in birth, yet always in graves. I appear in the banquet, each party and game, the middle of war, yet in peace just the same. I am found in the darkness, but not in the light, in pairs or alone, but in crowds out of sight. I'm silent in heaven, unseen within hell, though absent in greeting, I'll join your farewell. Do you know what the answer is? Can you figure it out? I will tell you the answer at the end of this video, but let me know in the comments what your thoughts are and if you think you know what the answer is. This book has been delightful, and I really recommend it if you're looking for something that is light, that is sweet, and that is fun. This is just a fun book. I think that's why I was able to put it down and come back to it for so long. And sometimes you just want a little bit of fun when you're reading, and it doesn't need to go on for forever or a long time, so you can just come back to it when you want next. I picked this book up because of the cover. This was definitely a cover buy, and it was totally worth it. I am so glad that I bought this book. The cover is also gorgeous, but this is definitely a book that I highly recommend. Well, I have had a fantastic time this month. I have read just brilliant books. I didn't read a bad book at all this month, which has been really nice. I still have books that are outstanding. I don't know if I'm going to do a February TBR just because February is going to be a lot like January, and it feels really dull to just kind of repeat that. So I've got all of the other books that I was reading. I've got The Witcher, I've got Good Omens, those are both still going, and then I'm just going to reread the Mirror Visitor series. So it's going to be exactly the same. But we will see. If I have new books, I'll definitely do a February wrap-up. But again, if I have just the same books, then I'm not going to do a wrap-up with the same books again. But we'll just have to see how the month goes and whether I can get to other things as well. I think I can. If I can read 3 Mirror Visitor books and Hero of Ages in a month, then I'm sure that I can get through, like, the 3 Mirror Visitor books and, like, The Witcher and something else that are smaller. Because Hero of Ages is giant! It's so big! And the Mirror Visitor books are not exactly small either. I just checked, and they're all about 500 pages, so they're also pretty big books. So if I can get through big books like that in a month, then I'm pretty sure I can get through some smaller ones as well. And The Witcher was not that big. One thing you might have noticed if you watched my January TBR is I didn't mention any Chobits or Clamp. I had to return Chobits to the library. My time was up and I had no more renewals. But I thought it was also time for me to take a break. I didn't end up reading either of the volumes that I still had because I was just a bit bored with it. So I think I need a break and then I can come back to it at some point in the future and keep going. And I think that's going to be the best way for me to keep going with this series without burning out or without really not wanting to read it. So I didn't do any Clamp, didn't do any Chobits this month, but I will get back to it eventually. So thank you for watching, everybody. I hope you've had a wonderful time. If you stuck around to find out the answer to the riddle, the answer to this riddle is the letter A. One thing that I found really fun after finding out the answer was going back to the riddle and rereading it and seeing it in context. And it works very well. I was very surprised by that riddle and I loved it. I thought it was great. Like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you all next time. Bye!